Next up, a Jonny Quest model kit. Well, hey everyone, and welcome back to another Initiative Modeler. I have a unique model kit to share with you here. This is not something that's going to take a lot to build, but it's such a unique kit, I thought I would create a video. This is a model based on the television show Jonny Quest. And I'm sure you'll agree, Jonny Quest got to be one of the best animated series ever made. Whether you're talking about the stories, the characters, the art design, it really stands out as one of the best. One of the things I loved about the show was the technology. They would fly around in this cool jet. They would have all kinds of unique gear to use underwater, fly around in jetpacks. One memorable piece of technology was this one here. This was featured in an episode called the Fraudulent Volcano. It's a hovercraft that the villains would fly around in. I always thought it was really cool. Now recently on a Jonny Quest fan page on Facebook, I came across a guy who posted some pictures of a model he built of this particular hovercraft. I reached out to him to find out where he got it, and he directed me to an eBay seller called 3 Stairs. Now if you go to his eBay page, you'll quickly see that he has all kinds of really cool items for sale there. Not only are they related to Jonny Quest, but a bunch of other TV series are featured there also, including Lost in Space. So this is a 3D printed model, and as you can see, it looks very similar to stuff you get from cosmic scale models. There are no layer lines. The detail is just beautiful. And I did ask them about their printing process. They told me that they use a specially formulated resin and hydrate printers. Now, because the white resin makes it difficult to appreciate the details, let me show you some shots from his eBay page. You can see he's really done a nice job with these designs that include all of the details that you see from the TV show. Now there's actually 2 ways you can go about painting this model. You can paint it like it appears in the episode, or you can replicate what is seen in the opening credits, because they are different. This is how they appear in the opening credits. You can see that the hovercraft itself is just a metallic color, probably like a metallic silver or something like that, and the guards are wearing red uniforms. However, in the episode, things are a bit more colorful. We can see the hovercraft here is kind of a pinkish color, and the guards instead here are wearing purple colored uniforms. So what I'm going to do is actually paint it as they appeared in the episode, and I do have a display base in mind, but I'll go over that with you here shortly. Let's go ahead and get started first with painting up the model. Alright, so I'm going to start off with 3 of these colors here. The vintage tea rose is going to be used as the base color. I think that'll match that subdued pink that we see on screen pretty well. And I chose these other 2 now. This bright pink is going to go along the bottom section. If you see that reference photo, you can see that circular area on the bottom is a brighter pink. And this darker pink I'll be using for the darker tones along here. You'll notice in the cartoon they used black for that, but I think it would look better if I just use a darker shade. Now, that bold stripe that you see on the side, I'm pretty sure is just supposed to represent reflection. I don't think that's any sort of pinstripe there. So my idea is to take these 2 colors and create that striping, however give it a more feathered look versus a bold stripe. Now I did kick around the idea of using metallic paints for this, but I couldn't quite find other shades for the darker tones I wanted, so I'm just going to go with standard paint. And I've got them ready here for my airbrush. Let's go ahead and begin now with applying the base color. Alright, so this is how it's turning out so far, and actually as you see in this video I'm applying the darker tone first, and what I ended up doing is combining that Royal Fuchsia with Monument Hobbies Burnt Red and a drop of black, and I think it turned out pretty well. And I also ended up applying that color to the underside of the wing as well as the interior to the hovercraft. Now just bear with me, that background noise that you hear is a compressor that my neighbor's running just outside my garage or nearby, so just ignore that. But I wanted to show you now some video of me applying the base color, which I really liked how that turned out. Now I did spray on the bright pink to the bottom section here. However, it's sprayed on very unevenly, so I did spray a light coat and then hand brush the rest. But either way, I think that was still a good choice for this color. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to paint in now the reflection here. And by the way, this panel has to be painted red according to the reference pictures. I will do that after painting on that reflection. So if it looks right, I'll go ahead and keep it. If it doesn't, I'll just spray over it with the base color. But as you can see, I did apply a gloss coat before moving on to this next step. Well, I'm very pleased with how the effect is looking here. Let me just guide you through how I did this. I started out by first applying a mid-tone using rolled masking tape as a guide. Now I ended up pulling the masking tape off because I started to create a well-defined line and I didn't want to do that. I wanted a feathered look. And after I got enough of the mid-tone, I started applying the darkest tone in the center. Now, as you see as I'm painting here, I did not extend the effect all the way through at first, but after pulling off the masking tape along the bottom, it didn't quite look right. Now, if you look at this reference photo, they did extend that effect to the bottom here in this shot. Most of the times you see the effect just in the middle section. But it seemed logical that the effect would extend all the way through, and that's what I ended up doing. Okay, well, what I need to do next now is apply the red tone along here and then work on some of the instrument panel. Well, the red panel is done now. This was painted with a combination of Monument Hobbies Bold Pyro Red and their Burnt Red. And just giving you a look at the instrument panel. Now, this is something that's not seen in the episode, but they included one here anyway. And I just used a variety of Vallejo paints to detail it. Well, now that the hovercraft is done, let's move on now to the figures. Okay, so here are the completed figures, and I think they're a good representation of what we saw on screen. I began by first mixing up the light purple color by combining Monument Hobbies Ultramarine with Vallejo's purple, and also added in some white. And I airbrushed the entire figure with this base color. Then I airbrushed a darker version of the combination, which was made from just adding more purple to that first mix. And after that, it was on to painting the darker features of the uniform. And I used a combination of Monument Hobbies dark gray blue mixed with some purple and some of the ultramarine. And this was applied to the head covering and the belt. Now I looked at a few more reference pictures, including this one, to see how the holster and shoulder strap of the sidearm were painted. The holster and strap were gray, and the barrels of the handgun and the rifles were a dark blue. And so for the dark blue, I used pure blue-gray for that. So I really do like the way they turned out, and incidentally with the goggles that they're wearing there, I first painted that light purple color and then just used Monument Hobbies transparent purple for that. And then I even dotted in the beady eyes onto each of the figures there. So they did a great job with sculpting these. I'm really happy with them. They really do look like the characters that you see on screen there. Well, you'll get a chance to see how they look in the hovercraft during the final reveal. For now, let's move on to the display base. Well, when it came to the display base, I actually did consider buying something like this. This is a levitating display base that you can find on Amazon, one of several, and no doubt it sure would be cool to see this hovercraft floating in the air. However, I decided against purchasing that because you have to have the unit plugged in for it to work, and I thought that would be an inconvenience not only at a model show, but also considering the display space that I have here. I just didn't think that would be a good way to go. Another thing I had in mind here is I want to also make this model transportable in case I decide to take it to Wonderfest or a model show. I want to be able to separate the model from the display base just as I did with the $6 Million Man and Dr. Zaius. So what I have in mind here is to make a display base that was inspired by one of the first scenes from the episode, and that is where the henchmen are chasing after a guy who's trying to escape from the facility, and they eventually run him off a cliff to where he falls into the water. And this scene, they've come up on the area that he went into the water, still trying to find him. So no doubt you can tell how this is going to work just by looking at it, but I've used a brass rod and mounted it into a larger rock piece. I've secured it here with air dry glue, although with the final piece I'll be using epoxy sculpt putty for better support. And the hovercraft itself is not very heavy, so this is going to be more than enough to support the hovercraft. And the other thing I've done is I've added a straight piece of styrene so that it keeps the hovercraft from tilting one side to the other. So I also drilled out a hole in the hovercraft to accommodate the post, and it simply mounts by just placing it onto the post like that. So I think from this angle it does a good job concealing the post as best as possible. As you walk around or look at it from different viewpoints, I think it does a fairly good job giving us the illusion that it's floating. Now for the water effect here, I used this gel gloss here from Golden Artist Colors. I think it does a really good job simulating water, and it's very easy to apply. Now for this mock-up, I didn't spend much time applying it, so I'm going to take more care when brushing it on to make it look more realistic. Now the display base is going to be a little larger than this, and of course I'm going to sculpt some better looking rocks. Let's go and get started. Okay, well here are the rocks, and I wanted to show you how the mounting post turned out. So as with the mock-up, I've got a brass rod that bends and has been inserted into the rock. It goes down to about right here, and that is glued into place with just hot glue. This is further reinforced with using 2-part epoxy, so it's pretty solid here. And rather than using styrene plastic to help support the hovercraft, I ended up taking 2 smaller rods and used solder to bind them to the main post. And it's definitely strong enough to support the lightweight hovercraft. So I did add a bit more texture here using air dry clay, and I did the same with some of the other rocks here. So they are ready to be painted up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that before moving on to the water effect. So this is how the display has turned out. Let me summarize how I did this. So the first thing I did was to paint the rocks with a light gray base color, then attached them to the foamular base. Now for the water effect, I intended to just use the gloss gel, but I decided to go back to a technique I had learned on YouTube that I used on my miniature sea view diorama a while back. This begins by using air dry clay as a base for the ocean surface, sculpting it to look like the waves and the motion of water around the rocks. Now to smooth the texture out so it doesn't look like clay, I adhered hand wipes. These are just wet hand wipes. And this was adhered to the surface using diluted gel gloss. And by the way, throughout all of this, the food dehydrator was used to speed the drying process. Next, I brushed on a black wash to the rocks. And once that was dry, I dry brushed some highlights. So it was on to painting the ocean surface now, and I started with Americana's Deep Midnight Blue. Now the events of the episode are supposed to take place in Tahiti, and since the waters of the South Pacific are a beautiful mix of deep and bright blues, I wet blended lighter shades of blue using Folk Art's Blue Peacock and Craftsmart's Mediterranean Blue. I wanted to include a little seafoam around the base of the rocks, and for this I glued on some shredded cotton using watered down white glue as the adhesive. I'm really happy with the way it turned out, and I'm glad that I went back to this technique because I think it does look better than just applying gloss gel over a painted surface. You can see it gives it a lot more depth and looks more convincing. So I finish off these displays by adding on styrene pieces here onto the sides. Last Christmas my wife gave me a Cricut, and I've demonstrated this a couple of times now on the channel, but I just absolutely love this little machine because I'm able to get pictures of the fonts used, and you can see here I found the Jonny Quest logo, as well as the logo from the title used in the episode. So I simply took screenshots of those, brought them into Photoshop, and was able to create some PNG formatted files that were then uploaded to the software of the Cricut. And this is just some video of me applying the lettering onto this styrene piece, and it adds just one other final touch here to the model, although this model would be very recognizable to any Jonny Quest fan. If you brought this to a model show, there are no doubt a lot of younger people who aren't familiar with the series, and so I thought adding this to the display makes the model more identifiable. Alright, well I'm going to go ahead and finish this up and show you the completed project in just a second. Alright guys, well here's my completed Jonny Quest Hovercraft as seen in the episode The Fraudulent Volcano. This kit is produced by 3 Stairs on eBay and comes in 1/24 scale. The hovercraft stands about 2 inches tall while the figures measure roughly 3 inches. I kicked things off by painting the hovercraft itself, and I chose to match the colors as they appear in the episode rather than the version seen in the opening credits. For the base tones I used standard craft paints and then brought in some darker shading with Monument Hobbies paints. In the episode, the craft features a darker stripe along its side, which I interpreted as a reflective effect. So instead of sharply outlining it, I airbrushed a soft feather transition. And I'm really happy with how it turned out. Next came the figures, easily one of my favorite parts of this build. The designer put an impressive level of detail into the uniforms and gear. I used a mix of purples and blues to match the episode's color scheme, again opting over what was seen in the show's intro where the uniforms were a monotone red. The poses are great too, and really bring the scene to life. Once the figures and hovercraft were completed, I moved on to the display base, and the first thing I needed to do was to devise a way that would make the craft appear to be hovering. For this, I chose to use a brass rod that was modified with a cross on one end that would act as a support for the model from underneath. I took advantage of the center round hole under the craft, which actually happened to be close in size to the 1/16 diameter brass rod that I had on hand. The other end of the rod was concealed by placing it into the tallest rock, and when the model is put onto the support post, the effect looks pretty convincing. Now, the display base also had to incorporate the use of a water effect because I chose to depict a scene shown in the beginning of the episode where they are searching for an escaped prisoner who had fallen into the ocean. The technique combines the use of air-dry clay, wet wipes, and gloss gel and results in a convincing effect that really finishes off the piece. And one final touch was to add on some vinyl decals that I created using my Cricut Joy machine. I was able to find screenshots of the show's logo and the fonts used on the title page of the episode. Overall, this is a beautifully designed and sculpted model, truly something unique, and it also makes a fantastic addition to my collection. If you can swing it, I highly recommend picking up one, and I'm confident the seller's other kits are just as impressive. Now, one thing I want to clarify for you guys is something I found confusing, and that is that when I was on eBay looking at this model, I happened to search Jonny Quest models to see if there were other things available, and I found a few other sellers that had models that were Jonny Quest related, and the listing also looked, just by the way it was set up, looked very similar to what I was seeing on 3Stairs. So I contacted them, and sure enough, they actually have a few other seller names on eBay. So let me list them for you here. It's Shaftman216, Toycave COL-10, and Toycave-Gas 216. So those sellers I happen to be seeing those items on were affiliated with them as well. They have a website under construction called toycavecollectibles.com, and you can find them on Facebook under Toy Cave Collectible. So a number of ways you can get in touch with them about this model and others that they have for sale. This model does retail, you'll see the price list as $100. They actually gave me a little bit of a discount. So I am finding now that a lot of designers, and I don't blame them for this, are starting to be and are hesitant to put the files up for sale on some of these sites like CG Trader and certainly Etsy, as well as Cults 3D. Simply because they get taken and they get pirated. As other people steal them, they sell them under their own name at a discounted price. And they also print them and sell off the prints without giving any credit to the original designer. So I don't blame them for doing this. On the other hand, it does make things fairly expensive. You're not only paying for the design, but also the printing process, and in this case they use high-grade resin as well as expensive printers, no doubt. So you have to kind of appreciate it from that point of view and understand it from their side, that things have become quite crazy online when it comes to these STL files and 3D prints. So I thought I would mention this because if you do go to these sites, you'll find that they are not inexpensive, but I really wanted to get a hold of this. I'm very pleased with it and very happy that I ordered it. So, as usual, if you have any questions about this particular project, feel free to contact me here on my YouTube channel or at illustratormodeler@gmail.com. So that brings a wrap to this build, as well as the end of my year for building here on the channel. As usual, I take off December and January because of the holidays and other projects that I've got going on, and this year's no exception. I definitely have other things in the queue to get done. So I will be back on the channel here in February. Now I think I might have time to put together 1 or 2 Interstellar Academies because there's a couple subjects I want to cover with that segment. So most likely you'll see those either in December or in January. So I did want to take this moment to wish you guys a happy Thanksgiving and happy holidays to you, your friends, and family. Thanks again for watching, and I do appreciate your support throughout the year and certainly all the kind comments and emails that you guys send. Take care, guys, and I'll see you then next year.